to this week's episode of Club Thrive, the podcast with me, Kate Sterling, with a very new and short haircut. Now, if you are watching this on my filming recording, you'll be able to see that I've got very short hair now. If you are not following on Instagram, go and check us out on Instagram at clubthrive_, because you'll see a bit more about what I'm talking about here. And actually, this is really annoying me because I'm looking at my camera and it looks a little bit wonky. I'm going to have to adjust that. It might not be, but I don't know. Is that the perfectionist in me? This is where I now muffle the microphone. I'm just going to leave that now so it doesn't fall off. Anyway, welcome to the podcast. Welcome. It has been a few weeks since I've released an episode. There has been an extraordinary amount of stuff going on, and I'm using this episode today to really draw a new line in the sand for 2026 with the intention of giving out, as I always have done, as much genuine value as possible. But there has been a lot going on and there is a reason behind the shorter hair. And part of the things I wanted to just explore today and unpack and share with you is part of the process in helping you really live a thriving life. So I promise you that there is reason behind it. And none of what I share today, none of what I share ever really about my personal side of life is ever to say, oh, woe is me, or I'm a victim. It's more to say this shit is happening and how am I using it to make my life better, to help me thrive? And how can you do the same in your life for yourself? It's never to say ever that how I do things is the right way. It's more to really try and help you open all those doors in your minds and your body and your life to understand the line between what you're doing because you want to and what you're doing because you think you should. Now, over the last 4 months, there's been a lot going on and it goes back even further than that, but I'm going to try and keep this contained. I want to make sure that I keep these episodes really valuable for you in the idea that they're going to motivate, inspire, empower you to keep on living your own thriving life. And part of the challenge is that when I set up this podcast 2 years ago, it was at the same time as an extraordinary, I'm loving this word at the moment, an extraordinary amount of change was also going on in my life. So where do I even start today? Let me start with a backstory of Club Thrive. So when I launched the podcast, I think it was about 2023, I had already been running a podcast called How to Live a Sterling Life that really shared the background around my experience of grief in divorce and depression that followed that and how I navigated it. And it was very open, very honest. It's still up there. You can go check it out. If you're going through tough times, it's actually there's incredible podcast episodes on there to listen to. You know, it was the same time as the pandemic. It was something that I did during the pandemic. And it was the same time as I was running my fitness company, which I'd called Sterling Fit. Now, like many of you, I went online with my work in 2020 because it's what we did. And it was a great pivot and I loved it. It really, really was an incredible thing to have been able to do. But there's something in that, isn't there, where we respond out of reactivity. It shows us what we're capable of, but sometimes we create something that isn't necessarily fully aligned with who we are or what we want. And it is in a way, because it is always an extension. But over time, I started to get really, really curious about online business and having a business. And at the same time was, you know, navigating still a lot of undercurrent changes in relation to my divorce, but also in career and identity. I was in my mid to late 30s at that point, starting to think about family, all that kind of stuff was going on. And when we're building things at the same time as also navigating a lot of identity change, if we don't have clarity on what we're building, then what we're building gets very muddled in us, which is why, of course, when we create, whether it's a business or career or you're writing, you're a creative, an artist, whatever it is, if there's not that separation, sometimes the lines get very murky and we can start to feel, you know, if we're not getting the career results we might want, then it can start to feel very personal. And it's always really helpful to understand the separation between us and the career or the business, but also how we can use the connection with us and the expression of who we are in our careers and in our business to build them, because ultimately, in a way, they probably are an extension of us. But when everything is kind of merging and amalgamating and growing all at the same time, sometimes it can get very unclear about what we're doing and who it's for, and also having the lines between who we are in our lives and then the work life. And when that gets blurred, that's when it starts to impact things like relationships, friendships, social life, your health, your bank balance, all this kind of stuff. Not necessarily badly, but sometimes the other way, or sometimes into burnout. And so the reason I share that is that when I launched this podcast back in 2023, you'll notice that there has been a shift probably in how I talk, because when I first launched it, it was really geared towards women in the creative industries or just kind of creative women, which we are all creative, resourceful and whole, to improve self-belief and confidence. And that still stands, that is still a massive part of it. But when I shifted into launching Club Thrive, I was also navigating my own career change as a result of becoming a mum, as a result of having knee surgery, which meant that I wasn't wanting to do as much fitness work anymore. I'd wanted to change anyway. I'd wanted to perhaps go offline from my fitness stuff and into a different trajectory, life and mindset coaching and performance coaching and all that, confidence coaching, all that kind of stuff. And what really happened at that time as well was that I launched the podcast at the same time as this transition, but also at the same time as my dad was starting to get very unwell with dementia. Now, the reason I'm sharing this is because you'll understand in a little bit why it's so important that we really allow all of these parts of us, the personal and the professional, to take up the space that they need to take up. Because at the same time in 2023, when I launched the podcast, I also set up a WhatsApp group, partly in a reactivity to our landlord saying, we want to increase the rent, and us freaking out and me being like, don't worry about it. I'll launch something and it'll all be great. And it was great. It was amazing. And we had an amazing WhatsApp community. But what I realized was that because of my experience of working with communities before, of running memberships, of running companies, I wanted to make sure that there was safeguarding in place. I wanted to make sure we could protect the energy. I wanted to make sure that whatever was building was I could handle it without it kind of getting out of control, because it grew very, very quickly. And what I also recognized was that there was something in this that I actually wanted to build as a business. Like I wanted for it to be an income stream. And I found that very hard to talk about for a long time, because it felt bad. It felt wrong. It felt like, well, I'm doing all these things and there's all these people in this space and I want to move it into a different platform. And loads of people said they were going to do it. And then I introduced the concept of here's a membership, and basically hardly anyone joined. And that for me popped a bit of a bubble of belief in what I was building for Club Thrive, because I was like, oh, well, in my head, at the back of my mind, I think, well, no, there was no thinking about it. I was trying to build a business in a way that would provide a financial income to support me, to then also be there for my daughter when she starts school, to be there in holidays and the school pickups. All of these things I am sharing because it is the unconscious, subconscious thinking that we have in creation of anything that goes into the action that we take. And the reason I've always been so open about it is not to say this is right or wrong. It's to say, what is your equivalent? Like, what are you thinking underneath the actions that you're making? Because this was the other interesting challenge for me. When I then launched Club Thrive as this idea of it's a membership, it's going to be about fitness, it's going to be about nutrition, it's going to be about really helping you thrive. I then got very tangled. I got very, very tangled in this idea of, but actually it's also for people in their career, and it's also for business owners, and it's also for founders, and it's also for mums. Oh my gosh. And also look at the impact this whole transition into motherhood and having a family is having on my partner, and as a family unit and as a self-employed family, and how hard I found it to adjust to the concept of not having time like I had always had it. I've always worked for myself, bar about 18 months when I worked in TV. All the other contracts after that were all freelance pretty much. And at the same time, there was this gradual decline with my dad's health, which for me spurred a couple of years worth of grief and holding space for that, and also guilt at feeling really bad that my mum was having to look after my dad basically. And also, these are the other things that come into it, right? With the communication, I'm very conscious of my family and their privacy. I'm also very conscious of the fact that it's really important to talk about these things, because if we don't talk about them, we keep communication trapped, and that's energy, that's energetic kind of stuff that we're not then expressing. But it's about understanding where it's best to express these things for you to then process and move your life forwards in a way you want to move it forwards. Because at the same time, often what comes up is a fear of what happens when you succeed, a fear of what happens for your family when you succeed. So at the background of all of this, I had this huge, not overwhelming, but just a very big weight on my shoulder that if I become successful, if I earn incredible money, what will my family think of me? What will my friends think of me? Who will I be then? These things are what we're going to continue to unpack this year, because if we don't face up to them, we constantly hold back without even realizing it. Now, when you also have a parent who either is unwell or has dementia or is taking up a lot of your brain capacity, it's happening without you really understanding sometimes how much brain capacity and energy it's taking up. But it is definitely taking up some time and energy, even, and it's totally from choice. And I'm so glad I did it. But the weekend trips over where I could to see my family, for example, to see my dad. Now, the thing with dementia is that it's so unpredictable and everyone has a completely different experience of it, much like becoming a parent. And I think that for me, I didn't realize at the time, looking back now, I think I was probably also experiencing some postpartum, postnatal depression or mental health challenges, because looking back now with where my mood was at a couple of years ago, my mood now is incredible. It's so good. But that's because at the time I was probably in a bit more survival mode than what I realized. So we're also going to be talking more about maternal mental health on this podcast this year. But we're also going to be talking about paternal mental health and the partnership of that, because and where I can, integrating beyond the heterosexual kind of, societal norms that we're used to growing up with. But this is where I also get myself unstuck, because over the last couple of years, in trying to include everyone, in trying to be inclusive, I know that that then dilutes the message. So my commitment this year as well is to just keep owning all of this, because it will be impacting your own marketing in your business, in your career, and selling yourself, or even communicating at home your own needs with your partner. Most of the people, or most of the worlds that I understand, come from a place of self-employment, right? But during the pandemic, it wasn't the memberships that I were running for kind of fitness, for example, were not just for self-employed people. So I've also had this huge transition in my work to understand who I can best support, or who I want to work with, or how I talk about that. And these things are important to take time for you to also unpack for yourself, because again, it will be really impacting how you talk about yourself, how you communicate, how you're worrying about things, and all of this uses up energy. The reason energy is so important is that if you don't have energy in a way that is really, really as alive as possible, which is what we do here at Club Thrive, really is all about energy, you do have low mood, you do lose your self-belief, you do lose your confidence, and then that starts to impact other lifestyle habits, for example, like your sleep, and then your exercise, and then your eating. And what I had was this really messy transition of not understanding how all of my skills could exist together, which was a concept of Club Thrive was always about being a space that anyone is welcome into. But at the beginning, it was for women. And what I recognized over the last couple of years was actually entrenched in that was my own deep fear of men. And really seeing it from a female perspective, really understanding the challenges that we have as women with identity, with self-worth, with self-esteem, with expression, with communication, with power, with the fear of success, with the fear of having money, with even talking about these things, with people pleasing, with feeling like we can take up space alongside navigating things like sexism, misogyny, patriarchy, all of these things that are ingrained in society and our conditioning, which I've worked on in myself for the last 10 years. And even beyond that, when I had my eating disorder as a teenager, that work really started then. But it is so ingrained in how we think and how we live. And then the experiences that we might have had with men, and that we might have had with people where we feel like we've been taken advantage of in situations where we have been vulnerable. Because underneath all of that for me was also this incredibly important diagnosis of ADHD in 2024. And that also muddled the whole world and landscape for Club Thrive, because at that time I thought, well, obviously I have ADHD. I've known that, I think, for a couple of years now, since it's been more prevalent on social media. But getting the diagnosis, I was expecting this kind of firework display. And what really happened was I just got stuck. And Dad was still declining. And then my whole work identity and career identity was also in this like, oh my God, motherhood is not what I expected. I've worked with kids for 20 years. I thought it was going to be just a really easy transition, and it was not that. And I think when you're also in a home environment where you've got a partner who is also navigating that, and I have spoken to my partner Warren, who's an actor, to come on the podcast to talk about this, because it's really complicated and there's a lot of negotiation that needs to go on. And I think as well, I started to think, oh, well, it's okay, I will focus on my coaching. I love my coaching. But when we do that, and we're doing it out of fear, right? We're doing all of these things out of this place of, I need to build the business to have an income for when my daughter starts school, come 2026, she's starting school in September this year now. Everything has to be in place by then, and that's that. There is so much pressure, there is so much fear, there is so much doing things that make sense rather than living really intuitively. And in January last year, because my partner was also working insane hours, doing what he could to support the family, I was doing a lot of the parenting in the evening and the weekend by myself. I was going to visit my dad. I was probably holding a lot more together than what I realized. In January last year, I nearly really, I think, had a breakdown. And it was at that point, I remember walking the pram up to Bromley High Street and just being like, I just wanted to walk away from the pram. I just thought, someone else, I can't do this. Someone else is going to be a better mum to my daughter than me. And in that moment, I knew something had to change because I was getting quite scared actually for my own mental health. I was feeling rage that felt collective rage. It wasn't just rage for myself, it was collective rage for womanhood and motherhood. I felt it so viscerally, not all the time, but at moments where I was really challenged with everything, with, probably exhaustion, energetically overstimulated, all of these things. And the rage was reminding me of what it was like as a teenager, which is why getting that ADHD diagnosis was so important, to understand all those previous behavioral patterns and all that kind of stuff. And I remember genuinely thinking, I can't be a parent. Someone else is going to be a better parent to this child than me. And I came home that day and I didn't really tell anyone about that because I knew that I could go to the GP. And if you're having similar things, please do go to the GP. I've been on antidepressants before. I've had therapy before. I've got no problems with any of those things. I talk about that a lot in How to Live a Sterling Life, the podcast before. Like, go listen to that podcast because it really talks about the depression and how I overcame that. And I will talk about more of these things this year because it all intertwines. It all intertwines. This is why it's taken me so long, I think, to get to this place with the podcast and with what I'm building at Club Thrive for you to become a part of, to really create this space that can hold it all. Without it just being one thing, without it just being for one type of person, but to honestly just kind of come at it from this perspective of what do you need to thrive? Like, who are you? What are you not getting in that? Like, what do you not believe is possible? What are the gaps? Is it money? Is it connection? Is it time? Is it energy? Is it all of it? Because we help you bridge those gaps. But I've had to kind of compartmentalize all of these things to kind of test it all out whilst holding everything going, whilst keeping the membership going. So not pushing for growth, basically, pushing to sustain what I had built already, to nurture it, to really look after it. And last year I had to do that myself. I had to, and I worked with my coach, kept working with her, bless her, Susie, she's a legend. She, held some incredibly deep coaching sessions for me where I was still processing stuff from the divorce, where I was still holding back from allowing myself, giving myself permission, which is what most of us hold back from doing, giving myself permission to really succeed, to really have what I want. Because on top of that, in October 2023, we had huge global shifts in Israel and Gaza, and the onslaught that followed from that, which was absolutely heinous and devastating to me, and that triggered grief in me that I had not felt since my divorce either. And so for me, there has been this huge couple of years of feeling like I'm not allowed more either, feeling like and it's ironic because I know it's going on because this is the work I do with clients, so I know what I'm going through. So I've needed coaching myself to understand that myself, to understand and to grieve my dad, to grieve the sadness that we were seeing on social media so much, the awfulness, not even sadness, like horrificness of human behavior. But what happened was I got stuck in that grief a little bit, and I got stuck in the guilt, and I got stuck in the thinking of I should be happy with my lot. And what that does is it puts a lid on our capabilities and our capacity for growth, and it puts a lid on what we're capable of, and it puts a lid on our potential, because we then contain ourselves, and that can feed into the anger and the burnout and the behavioral patterns that don't serve us. Because underneath all of that as well is, especially if you have ADHD, is this fear of rejection and this fear of doing wrong, because justice is such a big part of it, and this fear of kind of not being there as a good parent, and this fear of everything. But we don't know that at the time because we're just waking up every day and surviving. So last year in January, I was saying to a friend, let's just commit to doing the 1% shifts every single day, the 1% tiny shifts, because over time that's what makes the impact. And when you're a high achiever and you have big ambitions, that doesn't feel like enough. But let me tell you, from the last 24 years since I had my eating disorder, I had anorexia at 16, that has been the single thing that has got me to this point. And I feel like I'm absolutely about to take off with everything. Now, the irony in that is that back in September, just before I'm about to tell you the next part of the story, I had made a choice to no longer feel guilty about wanting more, to no longer feel like I had to be happy in a flat that is too small for us because other people have less. I recognized where I was holding back from my privilege because of that. I felt bad about my privilege. I was holding back from allowing my intelligence to exist because I felt probably bad about what I have. And I was containing it massively. And what I recognized was that I'd lived like that for a couple of years. It wasn't that I wasn't earning money. It wasn't that I wasn't doing things. It was just that I was doing it. I wasn't succeeding. I had incredible clients. I've got incredible reviews. It was all amazing. But I was doing it from a slightly unhelpful angle. And that absolutely did also contribute to the burnout. But more than that, it contributed to that sense of unfulfillment. It contributed to the sense of, what am I doing? Why do I not feel right? And the work that I was doing with my coach was really showing up this desire for collaboration, which is why I launched the in-person meetups. But it was also really highlighting this desire that I still had to work as an actor and a performer. And I've been able to blend some of that in. Obviously, we're doing things like the podcast, but also with public speaking. And I did my first keynote in November, which was amazing, at Sisterland Festival. Check it out, because they're going to be doing more. Anyway, it's an amazing venture. But just before September time, I really recognised that my dad's dementia and the grief for that and everything really over the last couple of years, I was like, this is not actually helping me now, and I can't actually genuinely help the people I want to help by being like this. I had to do a lot of letting go of seeing where perhaps I was feeling bad about letting go of maybe older versions of myself, that whether it was this concept of it's not even like the concept of the broke artist, it's more like honoring my value and what I can charge, for example, as a coach now based on my experience, not out of fleecing people, just based on genuinely my experience, versus the people I felt bad that couldn't afford my services, and understanding how I can then build a structure for a business in a way that facilitates that line, that growth, but without it taking all of the energy from me. And when you're a big-hearted founder, when you have deep care for social impact, when you want to change the world, these are the things you must work on. Because if you don't, you will stay broke, you will stay poor, you will stay, and all of this is without judgment, you will stay feeling slightly unsatisfied. And it's not to say you can't help people that don't have money. It's to say that we have a choice. There's an incredible part of Psychology of Money by Morgan Housel, I think it is. I'll link it in the chat. I read it years ago. But he says in the book about the psychology of money, basically, that there is this middle ground. And you're either in the kind of broke skin end, or you're in the wealthy rich end. And it's being stuck in the middle where you're not making the choice, that you kind of end up just not really getting anywhere. And I was definitely stuck in the middle. I'm not denying my privilege. I'm not denying the fact that I couldn't be here without savings that have come from family to help me as well. It's about honouring that and not feeling guilty about it, but just honouring it, and also saying, well, just because I have that doesn't mean I can't also go out there and make incredible business growth or career growth. It's about saying, well, if someone who has come from a background where they didn't have money can achieve that, why am I not letting myself do that just because I had a really privileged upbringing that I'm very grateful for? It's not about morality in any of this. It's not about judgment, because when we judge that, or when we add morality to all of these things, that is what holds you back. That is what holds us back from actually creating what we want, what you're capable of, because you see it as bad. We see money as bad. We see privilege as bad, because we then associate it with what else we're seeing in the world. And it's to flip all of that on its head, to say, well, if someone can come from a background where they didn't have money and they create a business or an outcome that is happy and fulfilled, and it's not just about the money, it's about all of it, then why can't I, and why shouldn't I, and why am I not doing it? And why are you not doing that? Or it's like when we celebrate people who have lost huge amounts of weight, for example, in society, and there's this big transition, but we don't necessarily say to someone who's put on weight, that's amazing. Or we don't necessarily say to someone who's just kind of maintaining their health, that's great, that's inspiring. It's really helpful just to name all of this, because it feeds into so much of judgment and where we hold ourselves back unconsciously, which is why I'm going to just keep generating the conversation this year. Get involved in the conversation. Voice your opinion, disagree with me, agree with me, share ideas. Let's explore it all together, because if we don't explore it all, we do stay stuck, and that's what builds the shame and the stigma, and that creates isolation, and that is what dampens our mental health and our well-being. So it's really about embracing the whole humanness behind it. And this was the other thing I got myself so worked up about last year, because of the whole challenges that I think I was having in the navigation of family life as a self-employed family, I'd have all these ideas pinging off, and then it was just like the scattergun. I was like, that's an idea, let's create that. So, for example, I toyed with changing the name of this podcast to What It Means to Be Human, because I'm absolutely fascinated by that. So then I just let that sit for a while. And I was like, well, okay, that is part of it. How can I bring that into the podcast? How can that be a channel of conversation? How can the other things that I really care about help to also separate my focus to help you get the information that's going to help you, because there is so much I can share, but if it's all just coming out in this blur, then it's not helpful, because for marketing or whatever, for messaging, it's not going to land with the things that you want to find. You're not going to be able to find it, and that's what creates the mess in our businesses and our lives and our brains and our body. That's what sinks the energy. Now back to September. In September, I had made a choice. I was like, I want to live with calm. I want to live as a well-resourced woman. The whole concept behind that for me stems back to an eating disorder, and it stems back to the culture for women where we are so used to being undernourished, over-exercised, overproductive, underfulfilled, underneath the thumb of everyone else, because we're scared to say what we think, which is why Club Thrive really at its core was originally for women, because I have experienced in my life times where I didn't have my voice, where I was taken advantage of, where that did have huge, painful, awful repercussions on my personal life, which took a decade to overcome. But in that, I also am now able to say, well, I perhaps wouldn't have learned that I have ADHD had I not had that time, because the visceral impact of those things was basically rejection sensitive dysphoria, RSD. But I wouldn't have known that at the time, a decade ago. I didn't know. I didn't have that language then. I didn't know what was going on. But now I do. And maybe I wouldn't have learned that had I not gone through those times. But because it is ingrained in us to hide our bodies, to feel like we're not allowed to express ourselves as women, to feel like everything that we look like is how we're judged, I really, 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 that still forms a part of the podcast. But the challenge for me was that I saw, and I have grown up seeing this, I'd grown up seeing it with my dad, the impact of depression and the impact for men. And what I genuinely believe is that we cannot have growth in this world, but also in our more local communities, without this collaboration. And it does require other people, it does require men to listen and to change, and it requires us to also listen and change ourselves too, because it's about power and it's about expression and it's about this idea of belonging, which is the whole concept of imposter syndrome, all of it, success. Yes, society is built with this concept of patriarchy, with men leading it and women there kind of, in the background. But I can't remember, I think it's probably a Napoleon, not Hill, is it Napoleon Hill book? Where he talks about the fact that, all successful men have a powerful woman who's basically driving his sex drive, who's driving his energy to create that charisma and presence. And women can have that too. It's just that we don't always allow ourselves to have it, because it feels scary and it feels like we are attention seeking or vain. But that's because of what society has put on top of it. And that is the conditioning. And that's what we have to understand, to sit with, to process, to then create an alternative reality of what you want, which is why we cannot do it in isolation. Yes, we can do it in communities where it feels safer to do that. But ultimately, we've got to also talk about the fear of men, the fear of being taken advantage of, the fear of being laughed at, all of these things, because if we don't talk about it, it sits in us. So this year, I promise, we're going to really unpack all of this, but from a place of real empowerment and from a place of let's kind of have those conversations with one another, to really in a safe space, within the membership at Club Thrive, which is still currently for women. Longer term, I do want to invite men into the membership, but I want to cultivate the space from a female woman energy to begin with. But the thing is that the more we can learn to work together across gender, across class, across background, across experience, actually the more powerful it is for you too. Because when you start to embrace that connection with people, you will be connected to their networks and their ideas, and you will be able to then also discern your own opinion, because this is about your voice and your beliefs and who you are. And a lot of that gets buried underneath the fear and the people pleasing and the keeping small and out the spotlight. And that's what we're really going to be doing, both within the membership. I promise you, I'm going to try and really do this with the content and the podcast and everything. So get involved. What do you need support with? What do you need empowering with? What space can we create for you to step into your true potential yourself? Because this is essentially what thriving is, right? It's not about shiny success. That is a byproduct of you living honestly with yourself. It's about you trusting yourself. And back to September, when I had made this choice, unbelievably, a few weeks after making this choice to live with calm, to be well resourced, to have time and energy, to talk more about it, which I already had done, with this idea that, if you've had an eating disorder as a teenager, you're probably still restricting growth, because the idea of being bigger is scary, because growing up, we were told that being in a bigger body, for example, is bad. So therefore, we associate having more as wrong. And this goes into how we see, society playing out in the world at the minute. It's all linked. So we've got to keep drawing awareness to it. But in September, I was like, I want to have money so I don't think about it anymore. I want to have a nice house that doesn't make me feel squashed in it. I want to have time and energy, which I'd built up over 2025. That was my proudest moment last year, was to realise that I'd become the parent I'd always wanted to be. Patient, calm, not all the time, but a lot of the time. Wasn't experiencing mum guilt. I had no problem at all with going off and doing what I wanted to do. And then in September, I found a lump in my neck. Now, this lump, to begin with, wasn't so worrying, because my daughter had chicken pox, and I thought, maybe it's just, it was right here in my neck, kind of up there. I thought, maybe it's just chicken pox. Maybe I've got a bit of chicken pox. So I went to the GP, and they were like, come back in 4 weeks if it's still there, or 6 weeks. So I went back in 4 weeks because I knew it wasn't going away. I was referred for a scan. The scan was a bit inconclusive. They weren't really that worried about it. I was referred back to the GP. The GP then referred me to ENT, which is in ear, nose and throat. They said, I'm not so worried about it. Let's go and have a scan and a little biopsy. So I went for a scan. They also found something on my thyroid. Now, the thing on the thyroid they were more worried about, they were like, we think that looks cancerous, basically. We're not so worried about the thing on the neck, but we'll biopsy both. So they took biopsies of both. Now, that got sent off 2 weeks later. At the same time, I had been offered the keynote at Sisterland, and actually I had to decide. I was offered that first biopsy on the same day I was meant to do my first keynote. So there's been lots of big decisions coming into this too. And I decided to push back the first biopsy to be able to still do the keynote at Sisterland. Now, at the same time, my dad went into hospital. It all happened in the same 3 days. My dad went into hospital. Now, that biopsy result came back with potential malignancy in this lump. The thyroid came back inconclusive. They wanted to retest the thyroid because they thought it still looked like cancer, even though the results on the biopsy of that didn't look like cancer. But they found signs of potential malignancy in the one in the neck. So I had to go for a full biopsy under local anaesthetic, which was quite the experience when you're lying there awake with someone prodding around, being like, damn it, I've lost it. Sighing like they've just kind of, put too many sugars in their tea. I had a full biopsy under local anaesthetic. Thank you to the Prue for the most amazing care I've had at the Prue in Orpington Way, Bromley Way. Anyway, the results from that came back, and I was actually 10 minutes away from meeting someone for a coffee. It was a day before the Vision Board workshop, and I had a call being like, we've got your results back. Can you come in today or Monday? And I said, I can make it in today, but I'll have to turn around straight away, and I'll come in as quick as I can. So I went back that same day and found out that it was lymphoma, non-Hodgkin lymphoma. Now, I am sharing this very lightly now because I'll link in to where I've shared a bit more about it on my social media, because I've processed it. And there were days in the bath where I was terrified, where in between all of getting all these results and everything like that, I didn't know the full picture, where it would kind of was starting to look like cancer, but I didn't know how bad it was. And all I could think of was a decade ago, just after my divorce, or when my divorce was kind of starting, I had been so depressed, I had wanted to take my life. And at this point in the bath, a decade later, I was there going, I don't want to die. I don't want to not see Sienna have her full life. I want my life. And this is why it's important to share all of this together, because I was only probably thinking on that level as a result of also making a choice a few weeks before to fully live and to not feel so sad and guilty about the world anymore, and about my dad, and to kind of really own my life as well. Anyway, I got the results from that, and we didn't have the staging yet. So with lymphoma, because it's in the lymphatic system, you don't know how far it's gone. So what then happened was that I had to go and meet the cancer unit, which I did on Christmas Eve. I had a PET scan the day before. Now, the PET scan, you're injected with something that has basically radioactive stuff in it. So I couldn't see Sienna for 8 hours after. And let me tell you, trying to avoid children, you're not allowed to see kids under 18 at Christmas time. I was like dodging all over the place. It would look hilarious. Anyway, I went back and had a glass of wine in the pub by myself before coming home after my 8 hours of distance, and then had to wait a week for the staging. At the same time, Christmas Eve, my dad went into palliative care. He was never going to come out of hospital, and at that time, because I had chosen to make the most of time, whatever happened with this lump and this diagnosis, I was actually handling everything extremely well, because I was also having huge days of tears or moments of crying and grief and fear. I was definitely indulging a bit more wine out of choice and being fine with that and enjoying it. And I was, after every bad bit of news or challenging bit of news, I was choosing to go and do something nice. I was putting on good clothes. I was wearing bright colours. I was doing my makeup. This stuff helped me beyond belief. I can't even tell you how much it helped me. It was incredible how much it was helping me. And I will keep unpacking this because it's important, because there might have been a version of me a year ago that would have thought that was vain or bad. And that's why we've got to keep unpacking ourselves, right? Unpacking where we hold ourselves back. Christmas Eve happened. And then a few days after that, we had Christmas, obviously. We were seeing Dad in hospital every day. In between all of this, I was spending time between my own appointments, going to see Dad in hospital. And actually, this time I will look back with such fondness, because it was a privilege to be able to go and sit with him between my own hospital appointments and not worry about work, to just park it and think of the bigger picture. I had to cancel so much work in that time. There were so many hospital appointments, but my priority was maintaining my energy and my mood and my mental well-being, because I was thinking of the bigger picture. And I did eye roll when I started to realize it would be cancer, because I thought, well, this is very good for talking about motivational speaking and overcoming challenge. And this is what starts to happen when you learn to reframe in a way that seeing opportunity in strife, basically. Because that enabled me to be present with my dad and not worry about work. Because I was like, well, in years to come, I will be okay. This is a challenging situation financially. It's going to be a very challenging time, but I'm going to get over it and it's going to be okay. And so it was amongst all of that I was able to be present with my family, and I will honor that time. I will be so grateful for that time, because I also got to say goodbye to my dad. And I know from grief, having experienced grief before, I had also probably developed some emotional regulation skills to help me handle emotion, which is what I'll also help you with this year. Or not help you with, but share more about how to handle your emotion. It's not about dampening it. It wasn't that I didn't have huge sobs. Over the last 3 years, I've had days where I've sobbed. I've screamed into swimming pools. I've let it out. We've got to let it out. But in all of this, I was also truly grateful for family. And we had a lovely Christmas, and it was all about celebrating life. And this to me is exactly what Club Thrive is about, because this is why it has taken me so long to redefine the mission and the vision of it all and the podcast, because it was never just about one thing, but I didn't know quite how to bring it all together. And the message here is to say it doesn't matter if it takes time. You just keep showing up as best you can, that 1% every single day that is a slight improvement on the day before, that is a new commitment. It's not about exhausting ourselves. It's about really honouring ourselves in that sense of being well-resourced, being honest, and having the integrity and self-respect to be self-accountable and to own our own lives and to be okay with that. Because if we're not okay with that, then that's why we end up holding back, out of fear of judgment, of rejection, of failure, of success, all of it, of hurting other people, of taking from people who need it. And flipping that mindset to being like, well, actually, if I have more, I can give more. If I'm fulfilled, I'm better across the board, has helped me enormously. But it does take the work. And I think having Dad in hospital really gave me insight into how precious life is. And he was an absolute inspiration that I didn't realize I had, actually, until we started to lose him to dementia. And all of the things that embarrassed me as a child, as he was my parent, were the things I missed the most. And I'll talk more about my dad. Like, I've shared an amazing video that he did. He championed mental health and depression and reducing the stigma of that, which is the other thing that I have struggled with integrating, because I want to talk about these things, but then, we always get worried about, like, well, I don't want to attract the wrong people, or I'm scared of this and all this kind of stuff. we've got to keep talking about it to understand what we're holding back from. But mental health comes into it hugely. How you think, how you feel, your mental strength, your resilience, but also where you're giving yourself a hard time where you don't need to, where you're not speaking kindly to yourself. All of that plays into mental health. And my dad, very sadly, he died on New Year's Eve. The day before, I got the PET scan results for my cancer to find out it was only stage 1, which is incredible news when you have lymphoma. So there was this day before going into the hospital room, all as a family being like, it's amazing news, it's not widespread, I can freeze my eggs if I want to. I'd had an appointment the day before, or no, that very same day on the 30th of January, I had an appointment that day at Guy's in London to say, do you want to freeze your eggs? And they called me that night to say, we can do it, let's go. And I was like, it's just too much going on. I need to know the bigger picture. And I decided in that moment to choose calm, as I had done in September, over taking something just because it had been offered to me. Trusting that if I'm not going to have another child, then that's just destiny for me. And that if I had gone through the procedure, yes, it would have still lined up with the chemotherapy that I'm about to have now, time frame wise, but that how I spent that time between New Year and now was that I didn't want to be any more stressed than I had to be. And when Dad died the next day, I think I actually then told them on the 1st or the 2nd of January that I didn't want to freeze my eggs. I chose that also so I could have space to process my dad's death and to help with the funeral planning. Now, why am I sharing all of this? Because since Dad has died, it has unleashed an incredible amount of energy in me. There is huge amounts of grief still, obviously, but it just has truly shown me how much energy we give out to other people. And I do not regret a single ounce of that to my dad. I am so happy I did that. But it's also to say that sometimes we give out that energy and we might feel bad about it, or we might not want to, but actually the benefit of that for me now is vast, because I'm like, right, now I'm truly inspired by what I'm relearning about my dad, about all the tenacity that he had. And I've got this new lease of life because there's almost like there's nothing left to lose anymore. I started chemotherapy on Friday for the cancer. It was meant to start last week, but I had COVID. And that's why I've got this haircut, because I'm going to lose all my hair, and I decided that I wanted to use this time as a chance to get my hair cut in a way. I've always wanted to get it done, and I really like it, and I wish I'd done it sooner. And there's a lesson in that as well. Trust your instinct and just go for it. And if it doesn't work out, then at least you tried. And I think that the reason I'm sharing such a big part of the story today is that, you know, I said this in an email to all my clients and to our Club Thrive members, but do not carry this news heavily. And I'm reading this word for word for the email. Part of it, I said other things as well, but use it as inspiration to make the most of your time as you want to spend it. Keep trusting yourself to do things your way, to be brave in your life, to live as well as you can, and to prioritize you this year. Try to not compare your challenges to mine. They are all of value, or to the world, right? You are unique, and that's what we will continue to bring out in 2026. Please always prioritize your mental and physical health where you can. It is invaluable. I invest heavily in mine, and it's part of the process. And that's why I have shared this very long-winded tale today, I guess, because I needed to do something to bring all of this together as a launch pad for 2026 for Club Thrive, for my work, for my career, and for also kind of setting myself free from holding back anymore, and kind of saying, actually, I do want a big career. I do want to be financially independent. I do want to buy a house. I do want to move out this flat. I'm very grateful for it. Yes, gratitude goes hand in hand, but I do want these things. I do want to help you do the same. I do want to help you thrive. And the arsenal of and I really, God, this is the other thing, isn't it? I've really overthink the words that I use because I'm so conscious I don't want to have any negative connotations, but I have such a wealth of experience that it's just been really hard to harness it, basically. So what I'm going to do this year is just keep sharing the tools, the ways of working, the motivation, because that was the other thing that I struggled with when I became a coach, because coaching is all around you and helping you step out of your shell and you facilitating that. I lost an edge of that driving kind of go energy that I'd had when I was doing a lot of fitness instruction, as in teaching fitness stuff, as in basically being a driving force behind your fitness. Because coaching is not about saying go. It's about understanding what you want and then saying, right, what are you going to do about it? But I lost a lot of my energy that is like this. It's like, right, come on then, let's go do it. Let's come on. I dare you. Go on. Because that's me. And this is you. And this is what Club Thrive is all about. So I'm just going to keep sharing all of this stuff this year. The mission and the vision for Club Thrive will continue to evolve. I want this to be a space for anyone who wants to make their life better. The membership for now is for women. Come and be a member. It is all about cultivating your energy, your mindset, your lifestyle, your habits. Aside from all of that, I'm going to be basically streamlining my other output of content so that you can really be clear on where to get what support you need where, because that's how my brain operates too. No one else has done this like this that I have seen, but no one else is me. And what I hope this year is that I'm going to be brave and I'm going to be honest with you as well around all the challenges that I will face when I also try and earn more, well, not try and earn more money, when I create more money, because this is about creation. This is not about like the exchange, the hustle, the grind, the stuck in the system. This is about creation and what we're capable of as humans. We are all capable of incredible things. It's just a matter of saying that I want it and giving yourself permission to do it. And then realizing and understanding what's holding you back from that, what's blocking you. It's that simple. It's not easy because it requires a whole nervous system upgrade and being able to hold more and changing your thoughts and living in a different way, just like it is for me, and how perhaps I've held back from expressing myself through clothing and actually, you know, presenting myself in a certain way. It's all part and parcel of it. And these are all the things I'm going to help you with this year, because it is about trust, self-trust, collaboration over competition, helping you overcome that fear of rejection. Really, you know, not trying to manage ADHD symptoms, but being like, well, how do we get rid of them? Because you're so fully fulfilled that you're so aligned with what you're doing. You're not even having the challenges, because that is possible. And how all of these challenges that you have in your life actually can be the fuel to your fire rather than the water that puts the flame out. These moments in your life are incredible chances for you to capitalize for good. And it does not mean that you're not going to experience grief, pain, turmoil, challenge, frustration. It's about understanding how these things can feed into what it is that you want, especially when resources might be limited, time, money, energy, to create more of them, to create more time, money, energy, love. It's all resources. It's all part of your ecosystem. And that's what I'm going to help you do at Club Thrive this year and forever, right? And not even just helping. You've got to do it too. I cannot do it for you. This is the other thing. We have to be self-accountable. So make sure that whenever you listen to things or you watch stuff, you take action from it, because that is how you make transformation happen. Otherwise, we're just consuming. And there's nothing wrong with that. But there needs to be a byproduct of it for you to actually then get a different outcome. So thank you so much for listening today. I just wanted to come on and get my momentum back up and going, because this is the other thing, isn't it? It's like when you've had a Christmas break and you don't want to do your workout. You just got to start. It doesn't matter if it's crap. You just got to get going. I wanted to give you a bigger picture of what's been going on for me. I'm going to link in the show notes a couple of my Instagram posts on my main page, just to give you a bit more of the story for any of you that wants to find out about it. I will be starting chemotherapy on Friday. That's going to be interesting. I am going to try and still do a podcast episode every week, even if it's a quick little motivational prompt. So do hit the follow button. Come and join for the ride. Be empowered to create your own thriving life, and let's also face all the things that you're scared of in making that happen, because that's basically the nuts and bolts of it. We don't create stuff because, yeah, there's very practical things that get in the way, but then we have to understand what it is, or figure out what it is that we need to do to get over those hurdles, to break through them, to jump around them, to actually get what you want. And a lot of the time it's decluttering what we're doing and not spending time doing the things that aren't really getting us where we want. So, you know, for any of you that have also, whether it's lost a parent or going through something like a cancer diagnosis or a health challenge, or losing a parent, or I think I just said that, sorry, or navigating a parent who's unwell, just know it's taking up energy. And sometimes it can be an incredible chance to really get clear on where you want to put your time, where you want to put your energy, and what you want, and then what you're denying yourself out of that. And sometimes it is about taking the risk. Sometimes it is like me saying, okay, well, this year actually, I've decided, even as a mum, I do want to have my acting career. Let's just see how that goes by saying it and putting it out there. But I also do want to run Club Thrive, and I want my coaching. And why can't it can all coexist, because they all feed into one another. It's not that they have to be things that only happen in isolation. It is actually all possible. It's just understanding which kind of levers need to be pulled and pulled back and shoved around a little bit. And ultimately, it's not about the money, but it is about saying, well, what do I want? And actually, how I was working before to try and be financially independent, because after my divorce I really learned that as women we need our own money, is to say, okay, well, how can I do that in a way that is so actually me? And sometimes we do have to do that in a way that isn't necessarily the right path, but it's on us to recognize when it's not the best path for us to be able to change it. I do not regret a single thing about what I've done over the last couple of years with my career to try and get myself to this point. There is so much navigation of the identity change of motherhood, but it is to be honest about what is taking more energy or money or whatever it is in what we're trying to create and build that isn't actually truly the extension of who we are at our best. And it is trusting that when you are at your best, energetically, mentally, physically, emotionally, that is how actually you can then build the financial security. Or if you have the financial security but you don't have the fulfillment, there are other things to explore there. And that's when the ego and all this other stuff comes into it. But I promise you, we will unpack that this year. I ask that you get involved, because for me, that gives me energy back to keep the podcast going. This was why when I moved the community into a new platform, I stalled a bit because the energy dropped out of it, because it just happens, because we're human, and that's how I feed. That's how I feed into my own energetic system, is being around you and getting your feedback and seeing what you're doing and celebrating your wins. So get involved and come and thrive, right? You don't have to join the membership, but listen to the podcast and let me know what you want to listen to. Is it laughter? Is it conversations? Is it hearing a man's side? Is it hearing more women talk about stuff? Is it honest conversations of how to handle a household that is maybe struggling with depression? Like, what is it? Because if we don't talk about these things, we just keep going around in circles. And actually, most of us are experiencing a lot of the same things at the same time. We just don't talk about it. And I'm here for the conversations this year. Anyway, thank you. Thank you for still being here. Thank you for supporting Club Thrive. Thank you for supporting me. The outpouring of support has been incredible. And I will definitely, there's loads of messages I still need to reply to. I'm going to take my time during chemo to really listen to those. I am very fortunate. The prognosis is looking good. I will still be processing, I'm sure, my dad's death for time to come, but I am truly inspired by him, and I feel like his spirit lives in me, that like in such a way now, I am so energized that I could not be in a better position. And this is where, for starting something like chemotherapy, mentally and energetically, and this is why who we are as people is the most important thing before we start layering everything else on the top. And it's why sometimes letting go of control and controlling what we can and just allowing the results to not necessarily explode but just do their thing is how you then have this flow of stuff coming in, whether it's work, money, opportunity, but also then you're putting yourself out there in the other way without controlling it, without trying to control what people think of you, without trying to contain your image. Because let me tell you, that's exactly the thing that keeps us stuck and burning out. And it also holds us back from fulfilling our own unique potential, which you have too. You are unique. There is no one like you. The trick is to truly accept that, and then to explore who you are at your best and what being well resourced means for you. What is it like to have money, to not worry about it? What is it like to feel creatively fulfilled? What is it like to run your own business? What is it like to work with community? What is it like to truly be mission, impact, socially led, social change led, in a way that impacts people, but you benefit too? We don't just need to, especially as women, give everything away. I want for you to hold on to some of that this year, as much of it as possible, to then also keep being able to give away what you want to. But this also happens, right, for any gender, for men who have been wronged too, for people of non-binary backgrounds or belief systems who who have been really hurt. We're very similar across gender in a way that we don't really talk about, and we need to, because until we do that, we're constantly going to feel like there's sides, and that's not how change happens. That's not how it works. That's how wars start. We don't want any wars. We want to stop that. We want to have this sense of, well, I do anyway. We want to have this sense of freedom for you, and how that can impact your home life. Because ultimately, if we're walking into our front doors grumpy and unhappy, that impacts everyone in the home. Don't get me wrong, I have to work on that too. But it takes that little ripple effect rather than trying to change everything else. I learned that the hard way. If we try and change other people, it just doesn't work. We end up just isolating ourselves further. So the best thing we can do is look after ourselves. Whether you want to see it as selfish, it doesn't really matter. It's not selfish because it impacts other people greatly in a good way, but we can only focus on ourselves. So let this year be about you, and let's see what happens. Okay, thank you for listening. Make sure you follow the podcast at Club Thrive _ on Instagram, and get involved. Get ready to get your teeth stuck into living a thriving life this year. And I will hold space for that in a way that you can expand into like you can't even believe is possible right now. And that just means you're going to basically take off all those layers of your self-censorship and you're squashing yourself into a box to be yourself, to live fully. I'm here for it. Okay, have a lovely rest of the week, and I will speak with you soon. Bye.